Hello, little dreamers, and welcome to our story time. Tonight, we're diving into a wonderful classic tale called Puss in Boots. It's a story about a very special cat, one who is not only clever and brave, but also incredibly loyal. We'll follow him and his master on an amazing adventure and see how a little bit of smart thinking and a lot of friendship can change everything. Are you ready? Let's get cozy and begin. Once upon a time, there was a poor miller who had 3 sons. When he passed away, he left his mill to his oldest son, his donkey to the second son, and to the youngest son, he left only his cat. The youngest son was very sad. "What am I going to do with just a cat?" he sighed. "I'll surely have nothing to eat and nowhere to live." But this was no ordinary cat. Hearing his master's words, the cat sat up and said, "Do not worry, master. Just give me a bag and a pair of boots made for a cat, and you will see that your inheritance is not so bad after all." The miller's son was very surprised to hear a cat talk, but he was curious. He spent his last few coins to get the cat a small bag and a fine pair of little boots. The cat, now known as Puss in Boots, put on his new boots, slung the bag over his shoulder, and marched confidently into the forest. He was a very clever cat. He put some fresh lettuce inside his bag and lay down, pretending to be asleep. Soon, a young, foolish rabbit, smelling the delicious lettuce, hopped right into the bag. Snap! Puss in Boots pulled the string tight and caught the rabbit. Instead of taking the rabbit to his master, Puss in Boots went straight to the king's palace. He bowed deeply before the king and said, "Your Majesty, I bring you a gift from my master, the noble Marquis of Carabas." The king was pleased with the plump rabbit and asked who this Marquis of Carabas was. Puss in Boots just smiled mysteriously. For many months, the cat continued to bring gifts of game to the king, always saying they were from the Marquis of Carabas. The king grew more and more curious about this generous nobleman. One day, Puss in Boots heard that the king and his beautiful daughter were going for a ride along the river. He ran to his master and said, "Master, do as I say, and your fortune will be made. Go and bathe in the river at the spot I show you." The miller's son, trusting his clever cat, did exactly as he was told. As the king's carriage passed by, Puss in Boots began to shout, "Help, help! The Marquis of Carabas is drowning." The king recognized the cat who brought him so many gifts. He ordered his guards to rescue the young man from the river. While his master was being pulled from the water, Puss in Boots told the king that wicked robbers had stolen his master's fine clothes. Of course, this was a lie, but the king believed him. He immediately ordered a magnificent suit of clothes for the Marquis. Dressed like a prince, the miller's son looked very handsome, and the princess thought so too. The king invited the young man to join them in the carriage. Puss in Boots, delighted with his plan, ran ahead. He came across some farmers working in a field. "Good people," he said, "when the king passes, you must tell him that these fields belong to the Marquis of Carabas. If you don't, you'll be chopped into tiny pieces." The frightened farmers agreed. When the king asked who owned the beautiful fields, they all replied, they belonged to the Marquis of Carabas. The king was very impressed by the Marquis's vast lands. Puss in Boots ran on and on, telling everyone the same thing. All the lands they passed now belonged to the Marquis of Carabas. Finally, he arrived at a huge, magnificent castle. This castle belonged to a powerful and fearsome ogre who was a magician. Puss in Boots bravely knocked on the door. He told the ogre he had heard of his amazing magical powers and wanted to see them. Flattered, the ogre turned himself into a huge, roaring lion. Puss in Boots acted scared, which pleased the ogre. Then the clever cat said, I have also heard that you can change into a very small animal, like a mouse. But I'm sure that's impossible for you. The ogre, eager to prove his power, immediately turned himself into a tiny mouse. And in a flash, Puss in Boots pounced on the mouse and ate him all up. Just then, the king's carriage arrived at the castle. Puss in Boots stood at the entrance and bowed. Welcome, Your Majesty, to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas. The king was astonished. Such a magnificent castle. He was so impressed with the Marquis's wealth and character that he offered him his daughter's hand in marriage. The miller's son, now truly a marquis, married the princess and lived happily in the grand castle. And Puss in Boots, he became a great lord himself and never had to chase mice again, except for a little fun now and then. And so, with a little cleverness and a lot of loyalty, a poor miller's son and his cat found their happily ever after. I hope you enjoyed our story tonight. Sweet dreams, and remember that even the smallest friend can have the biggest heart. Thank you for listening. If you liked our story, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more magical bedtime tales. Good night.